Chapter 72. Belch's lips trembled, and his face suddenly turned pale. The man at the bottom of the pit picked up the flashlight and waved it at him, seemingly saying something. Then, Belch took 2 shaky steps back, completely not intending to listen to what he said. The man in tattered clothes took 2 steps forward, and seeing Belch's frightened expression, he seemed to understand. He smiled at him, bent down, and broke an arm from the person's body. It was not a human at all. Wax statue. The man waved his hand at Belch and shouted loudly. The sound penetrated the pouring rain, and Belch was stunned for a moment, only then realizing that it was just a human wax statue. How could a human body be so fragile that it would break with a single bend? He breathed a sigh of relief. The man in tattered clothes stood in the rain, trying to climb up the rainwater to give the flashlight to Belch. The man no longer looked young, his appearance was ugly, his eyes were slanted, his mouth was crooked, his beard was bushy like weeds, and when he smiled, his sparse, black teeth were exposed. The man's body gave off a foul smell, and there was a machete with blood stains on his belt. Then, Belch saw the no longer young man struggling to climb up the hill, returning the flashlight to him. Although he was still alert, he didn't dare to show it, and with an apologetic expression, he took the item back. "Sorry, I just thought dash." "It's okay," the man waved his hands repeatedly. "I'm only responsible for transporting animal carcasses, and occasionally I also take out some trash." It seemed that the man was used to being misunderstood so much that he didn't notice Belch's gaze. He glanced at Belch and the car with its lights on behind him. "Is there a problem with your car?" "No," Belch shook his head, "the car is fine, it's just that the road ahead is blocked, we can't get through." Beep beep beep. The sound of the car horn in the rain startled Belch. He turned around unconsciously, and walked 2 or 3 steps to the car window. "Sister, what's wrong?" Belch said, then froze at the same time. The soft blanket wrapped around Siddle's body had been hidden somewhere by her. The girl's long golden hair fell behind her, revealing her shoulders and neck with graceful lines. Her snow-white chin was slightly raised, in the dark rain her blue eyes were strangely bright. At this moment, those eyes were coldly looking at him. "Didn't I ever teach you not to talk to strangers casually?" Belch. He looked at the girl who was curled up lazily on the chair before, now suddenly sitting up straight with a domineering aura. With mixed emotions he said, "Sister, I'm not a kid." But Belch still obediently returned to the driver's seat. The man who had thrown the body staggered after him, and through the car window he saw a very beautiful-looking girl. He seemed to be stunned for a moment, his eyes were cloudy and full of calculation. His Adam's apple moved slightly, and he saw the girl turn on her flashlight, but she very politely aimed the flashlight at the ground, using the faint light to look at him. The man said, "That boy said you guys are blocked and can't go. I know that the intersection ahead is prone to landslides. If you guys can go down with me, I know a detour that can go around." As if he was afraid that Siddle and Belch wouldn't believe him, he gestured, and on his rough and chapped fingers there were still traces of blood that had seeped into the cracks that hadn't been washed clean. "That road isn't far, it's easy to go, just go down from here, and you'll pass by an abandoned town, but it's okay, just drive through." Belch listened, then turned on the GPS, searched for the road the man mentioned, and found that there was indeed a town here that had been abandoned for many years. But the road the man mentioned was nowhere to be seen. But it was understandable. The town had been abandoned for many years, so it was normal for a village road in a small town to not be on the GPS map. He was secretly happy, intending to continue the other person's words, but when he saw Siddle, he silently swallowed the words he was about to say. "No need." The girl maintained a cold and distant attitude but still politely refused the man's good intentions. After that, Belch sat and listened to his sister and the man outside the door exchange words. The general content was that the man tried to persuade her a few sentences, but Siddle politely refused. After talking back and forth for a while, the man in old, tattered clothes seemed a little disappointed, his cloudy eyes rolled slightly, and waved at Siddle and Belch. "That's it, goodbye. Good luck to you too." Siddle politely waved back, turned his head and coldly glanced at Belch. Why aren't you driving yet? His sister suddenly became fierce. Belch didn't dare to say anything, silently stepped on the gas pedal and drove forward with the sound of water. In the dark rain, 2 car headlights were flashing. There was only one car on the deserted highway. Behind the car, an ugly-looking man stood in the heavy rain, seemed to purse his lips regretfully, touched the machete on his belt, and slowly walked down the hillside. He walked to his old truck, wiped his wet face, got in, closed the door, and started the engine. The truck made a rumbling sound, slowly driving deeper into the valley. After driving for more than 10 meters, the man's face suddenly became distorted. This made the already ugly face even more terrifying. He slammed the steering wheel, got out of the car, and walked to the front of the car to check the situation. The depression in front of the car was filled with rainwater. Perhaps because he had been talking to Siddle and Belch for too long, the valley was now filled with traces of the storm. The truck couldn't pass, so the man had to drag his drenched body back. But this time he turned around and changed direction. The truck, which smelled faintly of fish and was covered in blood, creaked and turned around and rushed up the hillside. The ugly man drove the truck up the hillside, but the rainwater had already reached the tires. It seemed that he couldn't stay here for too long. His face was gloomy and his eyes were dark, hesitating for a moment before stepping on the gas pedal. On the highway, there was another truck heading towards Belch's car. There was only one main road here. Belch drove another kilometer and hesitantly slowed down, hearing Siddle say, "Keep driving." He continued driving forward, but this time he only went a few dozen meters before something happened. A strong man was standing by the side of the road, drenched in rain. Seeing the headlights of the car coming, he waved happily, seeming to be shouting something. Behind the man was a car that had stopped. It seemed like the car had broken down, so he had to stand by the side of the road and wait miserably. Belch slowed down again and said, "Sister, that person seems to need help." Having a car accident in this kind of weather was very troublesome. Perhaps this person just wanted a ride. Siddle looked at the man who was 1m9 tall and weighed no less than 100 kilograms. "Leave him alone, go around." Belch. "Oh." He obediently drove past, hearing Siddle say softly, "One punch from him can kill 2 people like you." Belch. "Oh." The car drove around, ignoring the man's cry for help. The strong man disappointedly wiped the rain from his face, but because he was still wearing a raincoat, he didn't look too miserable. The strong man's eyes lit up, but when he saw the extremely old truck, whose body was still covered in blood, he flinched slightly, hesitated, and did not wave. The truck roared past, and the strong man continued to wait patiently. A few minutes later, a police car drove up. The strong man happily rushed out into the middle of the road, waving excitedly, "Hey, Sheriff. My car broke down, and it's stuck in the mud now, and the tires won't lift." The car door opened, and there were 2 policemen sitting in the driver's and passenger seats, and another policeman sitting in the back seat. "That's too bad." The policeman driving the car frowned as he examined the situation. "You get in the car first. The GPS says the road ahead is blocked." The strong man got into the car, took off his raincoat, and explained to the 3 people, "I can't find anyone to help me right now. I just want to find a place to rest and have something hot to drink." He shivered from the cold rain, and the fat on his body shook. "Hey man, you're really unlucky to have an accident in this kind of weather." The policeman in front threw him a pack of toilet paper. "We were also sent here for an emergency, but we ended up stuck here. It's raining so hard, we can't go out now. We can only go ahead and see what the situation is." "That's right," another policeman sighed. "If it weren't for the sudden report today, we wouldn't have come to such a remote place. The superiors were even anxious to ask us to send the evidence back. This damn weather, it's hard to travel." "Thank you," the strong man said gratefully. He was still wearing a formal suit and a neat tie, looking like he belonged to the upper class of society. The strong man used toilet paper to wipe the rain off his face, panting as he said with a smile, "By the way, my name is Malcolm Rivers. I wonder how I should address you police officers. The car drove another kilometer. Under the bright headlights, a small town quietly appeared. Before the town could be seen clearly, a hotel slowly appeared before Siddle's eyes. This was a small hotel, not very large in area, and the dim yellow light shone through the window. Through the pouring rain, one could vaguely see the silhouette of a woman walking by the window. The woman looked very thin and small, her head wrapped in a scarf, walking back and forth hurriedly. Through the window, one could see that the interior was very simple, looking very plain. Belch stopped the car not far away, looking at the GPS. Sis, just ahead is the intersection where the landslide occurred. Less than a kilometer away, he added. It was very dangerous to be near a mountain road with a landslide. Obviously, they couldn't continue driving forward now. In other words, it seemed like they could only stay in this small town that seemed to have been abandoned for a long time. Fortunately, there was still a hotel in the town that was still operating. Moving. Belch thought for a moment. Sister, let's go down and take a look. Then, let's take a break in the hotel for a while, because staying in the car is not a good solution. Moreover, the water has already reached nearly 1/3 of the car's body. The highway and the open spaces have flat terrain. If we want to drive to higher ground, we can only go into this small town, and we have to go through the hotel. Siddle's eyes suddenly darkened. She held Belch tightly. Wait a moment. The two of them waited quietly in the car for a few more minutes. At this moment, a car suddenly came from the opposite side of the highway. When the headlights came, Siddle saw clearly that it was a luxury car. This seemed to be a rich person. But how could a rich person come to a place like this? She suppressed her doubts, saw the car door open, a man in a suit got out. Then, a woman in a white wedding dress got out, the man held an umbrella, the two looked around and slowly walked towards the hotel. Siddle told Belch to park the car on the grass by the side of the road. When she saw a car approaching from afar, she turned off the car lights, so the newlyweds seemed to not notice that there was a car parked on the side of the road. When the man in the suit and the woman in the wedding dress walked into the hotel together, Siddle asked Belch in a low voice, "Didn't you say the road was blocked? Why could anyone still come here from there?" Belch was confused and said, "I don't know either." He turned on his phone, checked the location, and said confidently, "The road probably hasn't been repaired yet, the city government hasn't sent a notice yet, maybe they haven't checked the location, drove there and found out they couldn't go, so they turned back." He asked, "Sister, are we going out now?" Siddle shook his head. "Wait a little longer." The two of them lingered in the car for a while longer, then a truck rumbled over. The truck stopped, the door opened, and a man in ragged clothes who looked like a homeless man jumped out. He touched the machete on his belt, looked around, and seemed to see that only the hotel was occupied. The ugly man walked slowly towards the hotel. Belch was surprised. "Why is he here too?" Siddle shook her head, signaling him to be quiet. "They probably aren't the only ones who came here today," she replied quietly. Sure enough, not long after she finished speaking, a police car with flashing lights also stopped next to the hotel. 3 policemen got out of the car, along with a strong man in a suit. They walked to the hotel with one umbrella and knocked on the door. The door was quickly opened, and a thin woman with half of her face exposed welcomed them in. "Sister," Belch said in surprise when she saw the police and the guns on their belts, "there are police here, it should be safe, right? Can we get out of the car now?" The rain was still slowly rising, so staying in the car was not a good idea. Siddle thought for a few seconds and nodded. Before getting out of the car, she grabbed Belch and softly instructed, "You have to learn to be smart later, don't look at things you shouldn't see, don't listen to things you shouldn't hear, don't care about others, follow me closely, don't be alone with others, if you find anything wrong, immediately notify me." Also, Siddle's snow-white face was cold. She turned around and took out a pair of silver scissors and a dagger from her backpack, handing them to Belch. "If you get separated, remember to hide yourself. Hide the scissors well. If necessary, you can use the scissors to cut the tendons of your hands and feet, and you can also poke your eyes or anywhere. Last thing, she patted Belch's dull face, put away that stupid look of yours and make yourself look a little smarter. At least don't look like a retard. Siddle thought about how Belch was discovered eavesdropping on the 12 or 13-year-olds in Bill's group, and she felt a headache again. Forget it, as long as you can protect yourself. Belch. He stared blankly at the scissors in his hand for a moment, then stuffed them into his body. He turned around and saw Siddle shining a flashlight into the car's rearview mirror, adjusting his expression. In almost an instant, the blonde girl who had been wrapped in a blanket and curled up in the car chatting away seemed to have suddenly become a different person. Her blue eyes suddenly turned cold, like a sharp blue knife. Her